Hello, you all. How are you doing? Today is going to be a little bit of a kind of checking into the energetic pulse and maybe just offering us all some reminders because I've had about a week and a half to myself, which is the first time in a long, long time. And I've had a lot of just downtime of doing nothing. And I'm in a place where there really is nothing going on. And there's a kind of deafening silence to the place, like too silent in a way. And almost a very stagnant energy. And what that does is it creates a certain level of discomfort. And I'm very good at being on my own and doing nothing and just being in the present moment and being with my feelings and my thoughts. Like I've really become, I can't say a master because I don't know if we're ever a master of anything, but let's just say I'm well versed. I'm well versed on the topic. But it's definitely brought things up. And I guess I just want to kind of tap in and tune in and share just like these moments of just being human. You know, we live in a world right now that I'm not even physically going into anything. I'm not following anything, but I can feel it. So kind of from an energetic perspective, I can feel that there's an intensity, there's a chaos, there's a confusion, there's also beautiful upliftment, but then there's also a lot of like wrenches being thrown in the mix and dead ends and people that are really struggling, and it's just the stew of life right now. And so I just want it to just be like a gentle little check-in of like, okay, how do we navigate these times? And it's maybe it's nothing new, but I think the process of doing, whether you want to call it the inner work or it's your spiritual path or like, what the hell are we doing on this planet as human beings? I think a huge aspect of that is, how are you in relationship with yourself? How are you in the moment? How are you with your physical body, with your emotional body, with your spiritual body? How are you with you as you move through life? And, we always want to try and get it right, and we're looking for the manual to life, and neither exist. So it's just here, I'm here as a support to like, okay, how do we just be with our humanity? Because I think that that's kind of what this whole trip is about anyhow. So let's dive in and see where it takes us. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So I want to acknowledge that I think a lot of people, what I've been observing and witnessing and experiencing myself, are kind of going through like various forms of internal weather, sometimes in a day, in a week. Months can feel either really condensed, or August to me felt like 2 different months. It felt so long. And for some other people, it happened like really rapidly. But definitely a theme that I've observed just in my kind of personal circle is that it ebbs and flows really a lot recently, really a lot. And I think, if we don't have a very strong practice of how to be with ourselves without judgment and how to move through the uncomfortable parts, it can be disorienting, or it can really throw us off center. It can feel confusing. It can feel destabilizing and maybe even scary to some, and just a little bit like, what the hell is going on? And so I firstly just want to say, if you're going through that, it's totally okay. It's really normal. I think for these times, most especially, it's really normal. And, one thing that I'm really recognizing is that we're dropping into a very different center of gravity. I'm sure I've spoken about this before, but it's becoming very, very clear. Like, I think it's almost going to get to the point where if we continue to try to live life from our head, it's going to get increasingly more challenging. It's when we drop down into our hearts and we kind of expand and, soften and expand into a more energetic space, like the language of energy, of frequency. Like these are the kind of currencies, shall we call it, that are going to be far more valuable than just what our most especially our logical, rational mind it offers us, right? Again, it's a tool, it's not the master. And the reason why I'm kind of beginning with this point is because as I've been in this kind of stale and deafening silence, there have been moments where it's been really uncomfortable because the boredom has been unreal, because there's really nothing to do here and I'm not fed by the land. But there's also just a kind of energy around here because my closest friends here experience the same thing. I'm not saying it's like this for everyone because it's all somewhat, personal and subjective and relative, but there is a overall feeling, energy of the place where I am in that nothing ever changes. It's like a museum, literally it's like a museum where it has stopped in time and it's kind of like that day in and day out. So there's this boredom that has come up, and because of that, this discomfort and this, I'm trying to put it into words. I'm trying to articulate it as best as I can, but there is this like inner turmoil almost. And what I keep on hearing, because I'm still in this bloody transition of trying to find a home. If y'all bored, you should imagine what it's like. I'm so bored of it myself. But what I keep on hearing is, Corinne, you can't figure this one out with your head. And so like my mind might go into something of trying to figure out like, okay, what are my next steps? What is my game plan? How do I do this? Where do I go? What's the place? Where's my intuition? All of the questions that the mind likes to have, right? So many questions, so much trying to figure out. And I just so clearly hear this like, let your mind go. Well, that sounds a bit funny. It's not really saying it in that way, but it's like what I mean by let your mind go is like stop being on the hamster wheel that is trying to figure something out as if there's an answer to an equation, right? As if there's a formula that if you get the formula right, then you'll get the answer. What I keep on being invited into is just be, just feel, just be present, just be here right now. I was doing kind of channeling writing. So what that means is I put myself into kind of more of a meditative space and I ask questions with the intention that the answer comes from my higher self. And I let the pen just go on the page. And I asked the question, where am I to be? And the answer was here. And I was like, well, that's not making me very happy because where I am here, I really makes me deeply unhappy, really makes me deeply uncomfortable. It's like a spot in the world that I just do not get along with this mountain. And if you've been following me over the years, you know this, right? And I've tried to make my peace and have come back with more neutrality, but I still don't like it. And so I'm like, no, I don't like this answer. I don't like this answer because I responded going, okay, but if here makes me feel sad, it makes me feel depressed, it makes me feel stagnant, it makes me feel like I'm wasting my life, it makes me feel like I'm just digging myself into a grave already, and I'm not even at my proper mid-40s yet, then why? Why is here the best place? And the answer that came through was you have to wait for something to come into that you will respond to, and then things will start to unfold. Now, when you're channeling, there is a part that the skeptical mind that comes in that's like, yeah, this is just your mind, Corinne. Like you're just having an internal conversation. But I just listened to a podcast with Lee Harris and he was being interviewed on, I think it's called The Breakdown. It's a really fascinating interview because it's kind of this conversation between science and spirituality. So I think it's called the Breakdown. And I would recommend listening to that one with Lee Harris because I think, he speaks well to it because I think in the beginning there's like, well, how do you trust this voice? But one of the things that he said is it gave him answers that he either didn't like it didn't stroke his ego. You know, it was kind, but it didn't stroke his ego. It was always like, it kind of gave this information that it was like made him in that moment when it first came in, made him take self-responsibility, made him look at himself in a way that he had never had before. So he kind of knew, he could feel it anyway, but if there needed to be any confirmation, that it's like, this is not coming from me because this wouldn't be my normal self-talk. And the second cue, you could say, that showed him this isn't coming from his own ego is that his physical being, the energy in his physical being completely changed. And there was all of a sudden this feeling of peace, whereas before there was this tension and anxiety and turmoil. So, you know, when I say that I didn't like the answer, that in a way to me shows, well, this isn't my ego, because my ego might want to tell me something that I like to hear, right? And, you know, what the higher self will do, or your guides, or whoever you're communicating with, or whoever you personally connect with the most, it's not going to cater to your ego. It's not always going to tell you what you want to hear. It's going to tell you what you need to hear. And so, you know, I find myself in the discomfort of like, okay, I don't want to be here. And I have these moments where it's like I pinch myself and it's like, no, wake up, wake up, wake up. I don't want to be in this reality, you know, jump me to another timeline, like take me back to the sea. And, you know, the questions come in of like, what did I do? And did I make a mistake? And did I make the wrong decision? And yet, you know, I think intuition and life, we always want the whole puzzle to be laid out in front of us. We always want the whole picture to appear in one go. And it's very much more a process of connect the dots and step by step and what is the next right move. And so if you can make a decision from the place of what is the best next right step for me, that is in alignment, you know, and for my highest and greatest good, and trusting that every moment, you know, it is where we need to be. And there's no right or wrong. There's no perfect or, you know, failure. It's really just following that, you know, it's hard. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes it's so much easier said than done to really trust that we are where we're meant to be. And even when it's hard or it's uncomfortable, you know, that there is, it's kind of annoying to say that there's a reason for it, but at the very least, here we are. And so what helps us to relieve any suffering or resistance in the moment is, can I allow for what is here to be here? Like, can I not fight it? Like, can I just go, okay, this is where I am. And if it's uncomfortable, acknowledge the discomfort. If it's painful, acknowledge the pain. If it's vexing, acknowledge that it's vexing, right? Whatever the emotion that's wrapped up in it, allow it, allow it, allow it. So as I said in the intro, it's like, you know, how do we just be with our humanity? We have to allow what is present for us to be here. It doesn't mean indulge it, but it also doesn't mean suppress it or neglect it or circumvent it, right? There is this just like confronting of like, if you were to walk along a path and some being or some creature, animal, something comes up, let's say like, you know, it represents an emotion. What do you do with that, right? What do you do with that as it comes up to you on the path? Do you turn around and run? Do you try and fight it and punch it? Do you try and like dive into a bush, right? Like, what is the path of least resistance? You acknowledge it and you move on, right? You acknowledge it. Maybe you stop and have a conversation with it. Once that conversation is complete, you keep walking down your path. So I'm using that as an analogy of just, there's a simplicity. I always think the most profound things are very simple. You know, we don't need to have all of these like crazy techniques of how to be with your emotions and how to be with your human state. And sure, there are things that you can do. You know, if you're feeling anxiety, you can do humming, you can do breathing techniques, you can do meditation techniques, you can do tapping, you can do, you know, there's all sorts of tools that are here to help you. But what if like in the moment, What is the doorway to even think? Because sometimes, I don't know about you, when let's say I'm in a state that's like I'm really in a difficult place, I sometimes forget. I forget that I can hum, or I forget that I can do some breathing, or I forget it doesn't come up in the moment, because sometimes you're just so greatly in the discomfort. And our go-to, I think the way that we've been taught is, I don't like this, I don't want this, I want it to change. And unless we remember to do the humming or the breathing or the cold shower, to get out in nature, which all of those help so tremendously, and I highly recommend them. But the place, the point that I reach that allows me to shift it instantaneously. I don't mean it goes away, but I mean to shift it. And when I say shift it, it's what happens for me, at least, is it softens. And it softens because I don't resist. And I don't resist as much because I'm saying that kind of mantra of, can I allow what is here to be here? Can it be okay? And I think, in a society where we really don't like to be uncomfortable, most especially emotionally, but we really don't even like to be physically uncomfortable. We've really gotten so used to quote unquote ease and comfort. Not always easy, but just convenience. I'm going to put it in that way, in that term, convenience, where we get so frustrated, like when the internet takes a long time. Welcome to my world right now. We get frustrated when things don't happen kind of at the snap of a finger. And so likewise, when we're being with our human state and our emotions, we want the kind of quick fix. And yet it's like the point of entry, the first point of the release of suffering is that allowing. And I know I've said this before, but it's worth always coming back to, because like I said at the beginning, it's not that we just arrive to this place where all of a sudden we never have to do that again. Like, oh, I've arrived, I've reached enlightenment. I don't ever have to think about allowing ever again. And I don't need to hear Corinne talk about it anymore. It's like, no. Sometimes this is literally a daily practice. And that is the spiritual path. That is the path of self-development or inner work or personal growth, whatever label. I'm not really a fan of labels, but whatever label you want to give it to make sense for you. It's not a destination. I know that saying is so damn annoying, but it's true. It's not a destination. It's a journey, but the journey becomes easier, more easeful by being able to more often, more quickly drop into that space of allowing. And here's the thing, allowing doesn't mean that we all of a sudden become comfortable. Allowing just means that I'm going to have a day where I feel really uncomfortable and I'm going to allow it to be so. Like, it's okay. I might get to the end of that day and go, oh my God, that was terribly uncomfortable. But because I allowed it, it didn't nosedive into something that could become like a proper existential crisis, right? Now, on that note, some days might take you into an existential crisis. The allowing is that as you experience that, you don't judge it. That is an aspect of allowing. It's just that I'm in this experience. I need to go through whatever it is that I need to go through, the self-talk, the narrative, the stories, the memories, the beliefs, the emotions, the physicality, the sensations, everything, all of the stew of humanity in that moment. But as best as you can, that you don't add the extra layer of judging yourself for having that experience. What we're learning now is we're moving from mind to heart as we're recalibrating and rebalancing masculine, feminine. We're integrating both of these very important halves of ourselves. Is that we're giving permission to be human, to be in our humanity, to have emotions. And actually feelings and emotions as I've said and will say a million times more, they are such an important part of this human journey. They are incredible portals and gateways. They are incredibly wise teachers. If we listen and we pay attention and we tend to and we care about and we love, right? They're not something to get rid of. They're something to learn from and learn through, because the only way out is through, right? Through is the path of allowing. Through is I'm walking on that path, and this whatever you want to call it, this being that represents whatever emotion, whatever state, whatever thought, whatever belief is coming towards me. How am I going to respond to it? And that's where our free will comes in. How am I going to respond to this rather than unconsciously react, which is jump into the hedge, turn around and run, attack and fight, right? That's survival. That's first chakra. But how do I want to consciously choose to respond to what is approaching me on the path? Am I going to look it in the eye? And am I going to try and drop into my heart and have a heart-to-heart conversation with this aspect of myself? And, I think as we use these terms right now of awakening and ascension and conscious evolution and consciousness, to me, what all of that means is that we're reorienting ourselves into a different center of gravity, dropping from the mind to the heart, dropping from the purely the intellect into the more etheric, and broadening our conversation with ourselves that goes beyond just the mental and even just the physical. I mean, some people need to start with the physical, like have a conversation with your body. How's your body doing physically? Then you can move to how's my emotional body doing? What am I feeling? And then you can expand further into, and what is my energetic body saying, doing? One thing I found interesting that on this podcast, The Breakdown, I really hope I'm remembering that correctly. They were talking about how, and they come from a pretty science background, right? Like it's pretty intellectual, and they're getting more into the spiritual, which I think is really cool. But one of the things that they said they've seen again and again and again with people that they've interviewed, whether they were kind of neurologists or psychiatrists or therapists, is they said, like, the common thread was what uplifts people is some kind of connection to something that is greater than them, right? Be that some kind of divinity or spirit, or for some it's God, right? But it was so interesting that basically, people that you would think would be so far from the spiritual, that would be much more like give a pill or do this exercise, or things that are very kind of tangible and practical and factual and scientifically proven. They say that hands down, what affects people most in the most positive way is, do they have a relationship to something that is greater than them? So to the spiritual, to the etheric, to the divine. And if you watch these near-death experiences, my favorite are the ones of, atheists. And I'm not personally religious. And even when I say I'm spiritual, I'm not spiritual in I don't follow any particular path, But do I believe that there is some kind of consciousness and love? Absolutely. Do I believe that I'm just this body and personality? Like, no, I know that I'm not that at all. Sometimes I really struggle with that, right? Sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to go home to my true habitat and my true self. And, and I think it doesn't always mean that when we have this kind of, it's not just faith, it's a relationship, it's a conversation. It's knowing that we're not alone here. And we're not alone because there's other people, but we're not alone because there is some kind of spirit that is holding us and guiding us and with us and is us, right? And I think just over thousands of years of being severed from that, we can feel so damn alone. And I'm not going to lie, like I have moments where if I really am going through a hard phase in my life, I wobble with my, I ultimately still always believe, but I wobble or I get upset at it, I get upset with spirit. I get upset with my soul. But it's like any relationship, no relationship. Like if you get married to someone and you're with them for like decades, it's not going to be like roses and puppy dogs and rainbows every day. There are going to be days where you're like, I don't like you. I hate you. In fact, like I'm not enjoying this. I don't want to be with you. You annoy me. I think sometimes our relationship to our soul or to God or our guides or our angels, sometimes it can be like that. And that's okay. Why? Because we're human and we have these complex emotions. And that's okay. We're here to learn through them and with them and by them. So, I'm sitting here speaking to you, and it's this a little bit what I shared with you 2 weeks ago now of life is lived forwards but understood backwards. Sometimes we're in the moment, we haven't a clue. And when you pass that moment, and sometimes it's weeks, and sometimes it's months, and sometimes it's years down the road where we can turn our head and reflect and look down the path that we've walked and go, oh, right, okay, now I get it. Now I get why I went through what I went through. But sometimes that's even like at the end of your day. If you had a difficult day, it's like, okay, now that I'm at the end of it and I've moved through the discomfort, and I've come back into, because inevitably we do. Somehow we just do. Eventually it changes. Maybe the phase actually lasts a long time, but eventually it does change. And in that moment where even if it's like a fleeting moment, there can be a moment of peace where you have this reflection that's like, oh, okay. At the very least, I got through that, right? I got through that. And to the soul, there is... it's very annoying for the human part, but to the soul, there's an excitement of the growing pains. There's an excitement to it because it represents growth. It means that you're not just as a human and your personality and your ego and all of this is growing. Your soul is expanding through the very experience. And I'm not saying that it can only grow through challenge and suffering, but it when the rubber hits the road, there is a point of tension in that excites the soul because it's something new and different, right? And in the challenge of it and in the way that we respond to the challenge, there's an invitation. Like that is a gateway, that is a portal to growth and expansion. Now, I'm having the intuition to talk about intuition. So part of this, like, how do we be with our humanity? How do we move through the days and through everything that we're going through with all the feelings and all the thoughts? And, for some, there might be fear and anxiety and chaos and instability and all of these things. Intuition, another, I think, big invitation right now in this transformation, and especially as the old world and the old self and the old identities within that structure are crumbling. So meaning that everything is logical and rational, left brain, more the mind rather than the body, thoughts over emotions, rationale over intuition, masculine over feminine, left brain over right brain. As that whole kind of structure crumbles and we're recalibrating and realigning and rebalancing, as I said earlier, intuition is something that is going to come much, much more strongly online because it's going to, it's just who we are. It's natural and innate to us. But as I said earlier, it's like we are disconnected from these things. We're disconnected from source. We're disconnected from nature. So of course we're going to be disconnected from our intuition. And I was listening to someone speak on YouTube about how one of the things that we're here to learn is how to listen to that voice, how to listen to our own inner authority and our own sovereignty, and that we're not always looking for the answer to something, into ourselves, into our lives outside of ourselves, right? That we really are the inner authority. Now, here's the thing about intuition. And I feel like I was saying this to a friend of mine yesterday as I was leaving a WhatsApp message. It's like, man, I feel like I'm failing this test all the time. That it's like sometimes I'm highly intuitive and sometimes I really do listen to and follow my intuition. And there are many little times where I really don't. And it's like after I'm like, damn it, why didn't I just listen to it? Because the thing is the very, 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 very first thought that comes into your mind or feeling or sense is your intuition. But it's often very humble, and not humble, it's quiet. It's not obvious, it's not blunt, it's not loud, it's not aggressive, it's not like, do this, right? But it's just this little voice. And the thing is, what I found myself, there are these just kind of small situations over the last couple of days where I heard it and I did something else. So I overrode it. And this is the bitch about having free will, is that we can override our own intuition. We can say, oh yeah, I hear you. Nope, not going to do it. And the thing is that when we don't listen to our intuition, we kind of get into either a little bit of trouble, meaning we created more discomfort or a bit more of a hassle or complication, whatever. It's not like it doesn't have to be terrible. It's not life-threatening. I mean, I hope that if something is more life-threatening, that our intuition is like much louder. I mean, I definitely have had moments of that. I think I've shared in an episode when I had that intuition to not get on a plane and had to go down and actually ask for, give our tickets back and get the money back. And it was this whole kind of miraculous experience. So that was a very, very strong, completely irrational, but highly intuitive decision moment that really, I think, actually saved my life about a week later. But often that intuitive voice around just these small things, like little choices that we make, it can be very, very subtle. And what I'm still learning to do is to not reprimand myself when I don't follow it. And after the fact go, God damn it, why didn't I? Why didn't I? And what she was saying is just like, yeah, we're just learning to listen to it. And a lot of times we're going to fail. And then you do it again. And then sometimes you might kind of get it right, quote unquote. And it will feel great. And then there are times where you're like, oh yeah, nope, didn't listen to it, right? So an example that she gave, I mean, I could give many examples, but she gave a kind of a very simple one, is she was using this more as an analogy that also kind of really exemplified in a really good way this relationship to intuition. So she was in Los Angeles, I think. And she wanted to, obviously the fastest way to get home was on the motorway, highway, wherever, depending on what country you're listening to this from. And the fastest way was to go on the highway. And her sat nav was telling her, take a U-turn. Take a U-turn. She was like, no, I don't want to take a U-turn. I don't want to go through a bunch of little towns to get to where she needed to get to because that would take a long time. She's like, I want to go on the highway. And the sat nav kept on saying, take a U-turn, take a U-turn. And she overrode it. Then she gets onto the ramp coming on to the highway and it's just chock-a-block full traffic. And she's like, oh, shoot, right? Luckily, she was able to get off onto the slip road and make a U-turn and follow the sat nav. And yes, she had to go through these towns and it took her maybe an hour to get home. But had she been on the highway, it would have taken at least double that, right? So she was just using this as a really good example of like the sat nav represented her intuition that was saying, take a U-turn. It's going to be easier. Like if you take a U-turn, you think it's going to take longer, but it's actually going to be easier. Are you going to listen to me? And that free will that overrides, it goes, nope, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to do this. And then you're like, oh, crap. No, this really is not the right decision. It's not life or death. You're not going to be punished for it. But it was more easeful to listen to the sat nav, take the U-turn and get back in that way. That was different than what her mind wanted her to do, right? So part of also dropping from the mind to the heart, from the rational into the intuitive, is not needing to do it the way that we've always done it. That kind of stubbornness and rigidity that's like, yeah, but I know this and this is the way I've always done it, so I'm going to do it this way. We're actually being invited to do it a different way. So an example that I had, and I don't know if I shared this in the last podcast, I had this intuition to go to this city. It's not a place that I want to live because I'm not interested in living in a city, but I had this intuition that it's like, I need to go there. When I got there, the tram didn't go all the way into the center, so we were dropped off outside. I didn't find the bus that would have taken me in. And so I ended up walking. My foot was really, really bad. I'd had like some odd kind of little mini injury. And so I'm hobbling along and I'm walking behind this couple that's also trying to figure out where to go. And at one point they go off to the right where there's a river, and I know that you can cross to the other side, and then the center is to the left. And I had this idea that it's like, okay, I'm going to go into the center because I know it. And there's a cafe there that I really want to go to. I don't remember where it is exactly, and I don't remember the name of it, but I'm going to go there. And that subtle, intuitive voice, firstly, I caught note, this intuitive looking of seeing that couple go over there. And I was like, that's interesting. I wonder why they're going in that direction. Like if they're tourists, why would they not go towards the center, right? They're going in that direction. And so I felt like that was kind of like angels say, go in that direction. And for a moment, there was this like, go over to that side of the river. And my first logical, rational thought was, no, I want to go to what's familiar. I want to go to this restaurant. My foot, I can't walk too much, so I don't want to, cross the river and go to another place, and I don't know that side so well. It's too much for me to do. And so I don't listen to that voice, and I start going towards the center. And I hear that voice saying, you were meant to go over there. And I kind of said, like, I don't care, I'm going this way. And what ended up happening was like a disastrous afternoon of me literally walking in circles, so lost and so disoriented. And even my Google Maps couldn't find me on the map. And I kept on like trying to figure out where this restaurant was, and I never found it. And my foot was hurting so badly. And I kept on hearing this voice saying, Corinne, do it differently. Just do it differently. And unfortunately, I got so exhausted and my foot was hurting so bad that I just made the decision to leave and to get back to my car, which was like an epic journey in and of itself to get to. And so, of course, life is lived forward and understood backwards. When I reflected upon it, I was like, shit, I wonder how that day could have been so different had I just listened and followed that voice. Now, I could say like everything happens for a reason. Maybe if had I followed it, maybe something would have opened up. Maybe I would have had a very different experience. Maybe I would have run into someone, had a conversation with someone. I don't know. Like that could have taken me into a whole different trajectory and timeline. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. What ended up happening is that I had had such a terrible day that it really plummeted me down into this complete, like, I give up. Now, what came out of that was an insight that was also useful, and it was also a surrendering that was also useful. But I feel like it was kind of a bit of a harsh, brutal lesson, and I still find myself being like, wow, I'm so curious if I had gone right instead of left, and I'll never know. And I don't have the energy to go back there because it's like a good 2.5 hours to get there. So what I'm learning is to not reprimand myself, like to beat myself up for like, why didn't you just listen to it and follow it? But it's also a really good, like if we're here to learn to listen to that voice, just recognize when you don't and recognize how it makes you feel and try not to go into judgment, but just recognize it and recognize how the voice sounds and feels and how you go against it and how or override it and how that feels and how that sounds in your mind and your being. And the I guess the lesson, the invitation, what we're here to learn is how would I do it differently next time? Because our soul doesn't judge us. God, spirit, universe, consciousness doesn't judge us. Our ego certainly judges us like, man, oh man, it's very uncomfortable sometimes, right? So I learn to be humble and have humility and let it go. And not judge myself for it. And I also set the intention that I'm going to do my best to listen to it, And sometimes what that means, and this is the rewiring, I really feel like it's a rewiring of what that story that I just shared with you exemplifies, is that our brain so wants to do what it knows and what it's used to and what it's familiar with. Right? Even if there's a part of us that's hugely adventurous and spontaneous and I want to do something different, I think, this was a number that I read a long time ago. Maybe it's changed by now, but like 80% of our brain functions on what it knows. Only 20% is open to the unknown, right? And our intuition represents that 20% because it's bringing us into the unknown, where it's the unknown. So part of it is scary, but also another part is very mystical, right? Like that could be part of the adventure and like, ooh, what's going to be there, right? And I think as we're shifting centers of gravity, it's almost like we have to train our mind to be more curious. Like, be more curious, be more open-minded, try something different. You don't need to know how to do it. You don't need to know what it's going to render on the other side of it, right? Just, can you be open to doing something different and be curious enough to not need to know and just give it a go? And if nothing comes out of it, that's okay. It's a different experience. Can that be okay? Can you allow that to happen, right? So part of moving out of left brain, rational, logical, need the proof, need the evidence, need it to be concrete, need it to be predictable, need it to be safe, need to be able to control, to let's be open to the unknown and the mysticism within the unknown. And it's like flexing a different muscle that we need to like go to the spiritual gym and start working that muscle more and more and more and more. Because then the more that we do that, the more familiar we become, and we like familiarity. We're habitual creatures. So if we're familiar with something, we're more likely to lean into it. And so familiarity doesn't need to be control, but it can be, oh, I know this. And so because I know this, I feel more comfortable to trust it, right? Even if intuition doesn't give you the whole picture or the whole puzzle, it just might give you a breadcrumb. It might give you the next dot. But there's I know this, I've done this, I trust this more. Even if I don't know where it's taking me, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know why it's telling me to go right instead of left, but I'm going to trust it and trust that it's guiding me for a reason, right? And then this comes into that conversation of maybe you're walking down the path and who you meet is your higher self. Who you meet is your soul. What kind of a conversation and partnership are you going to have with your soul that you can then walk on that path side by side? And I think that's what we're learning to do right now. As the veil gets thinner, as the amnesia hopefully begins to lift, that we're remembering that we're spiritual beings having this human experience. And the human experience feels very real. And so be in it, learn from it. Don't transcend it to the point of like trying to escape it. Right? Don't neglect it, deny it, suppress it. Don't change it. Allow it. And then know that you are more than that. That's the vehicle. That is the car that's taking you through this like road trip of life. And your soul needs the car and the car needs the soul, right? We need each other. The car needs the driver and the driver needs the car. So the soul needs the human just as much as the human needs the soul. And we're learning, how do we walk on this path of life together in partnership? So, I'm trying to think if there's any other bits to share. I think that feels complete for now. So it's not about getting it right. You're going to mess it up daily. And by messing it up, that sounds very judgmental, but meaning you're going to like hiccup and be like, oh crap, I didn't listen to myself so well in that moment. I didn't trust my intuition so much in that moment, or I wasn't so gentle and kind with my emotional state in that moment as I could have been. But like, if you can learn and flex the muscle of reflection to then go into the experience and allow it and observe it and witness and learn from it, and then make a different choice next time to the best of your ability. What we're learning right now is to be in our humanity, but then also bringing in our spiritual self and learning how to be in harmony with both. So the words to me that are the theme of the daily practice of being human is, can you allow what is? Of course, you can shift and change something if need be. Allow is an apathy, right? Allow is just, this is what is, and I have to allow it to be here in order to shift it should I so choose to, right? Allow, and then can you trust? Trust yourself, trust your higher self, trust your intuition, trust your emotions, trust your body, trust your life, trust God, trust spirit, trust angels, trust God, whatever it is. We're coming into a time of, it's okay to have healthy skepticism. That's fine. But we're coming out of such a judgmental period of humanity into one that is going to be much more kind, collaborative, gentle, intuitive, in collaboration and in harmony with whomever or whatever is before us, be it ourselves, our higher self, another person, a child, a lover, a partner, an animal. We're reconfiguring everything. And in the crumbling, it can be deeply, deeply uncomfortable. It's like we're taking all the scaffolding off. But what is going to come through on the other side of that is a much more empowered, strong, true, authentic, honest, vibrant, energetic, alive, heartful being. And that to me represents happiness and joy and expansion and evolution and light and love and the growth that we're here to experience right now. And it's damn hard sometimes. Some days are damn hard. We live in a crazy, wacky world. And the invitation is go deeper into your world and make peace there. And then the outer world will change. As within, so without, as above, so below. We know this, right? So I'll leave it at that. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. Thank you for being here with me. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.